We fell in love in Japan, and for a while it felt like a dream. But love, it turns out, wasn't the hardest part. I still remember the sound of her shoes on the temple stones. Soft, careful, like she didn't want the earth to know she was there. It was snowing barely, the kind of snow that falls so slowly you wonder if it's really falling at all. And I stood there like a tourist with no map, clutching a half-wet notebook, blinking at the incense smoke curling in the cold air. I hadn't planned to visit Kyoto that day. I'd gotten on the wrong train, or maybe the right one. It depends on how you tell the story. But there I was, under the red gate of a forgotten shrine, watching a girl with a red umbrella stand perfectly still, as if the whole world was holding its breath with her. She noticed me, not in the obvious way. No gasp, no startled glance, just a quiet tilt of the head. A recognition, not of me, but of the moment. And then she smiled. That smile undid me. It didn't say hello. It said, "I see you." I didn't speak. I didn't move. My fingers gripped the spine of my notebook tighter, as if it might anchor me to the ground. What was I supposed to say? "Hi, I'm lost"? "Hi, I came to Japan to find something I couldn't name"? "Hi, I think my life just changed"? I said none of that. Instead, I bowed awkwardly and said the only Japanese word I was sure I wasn't butchering, "Sumimasen." She raised her umbrella slightly, the light bouncing off its surface like a lantern. Her voice was soft, careful. "You are not from here." Not a question, a fact wrapped in kindness. I laughed, nervous, grateful. "Is that obvious?" "A little." She smiled again, and this time her eyes joined in. That was how it began. Not with fireworks, not with grand declarations, but with snow that barely touched the ground and a silence that felt like music. If you had asked me then, in that precise moment, I would have told you, this is the start of something easy, something light. I would have believed that loving her would be the most difficult thing I ever did, and I would have been wrong. Because the hardest part was staying in love when everything, family, fear, even our dreams, tried to pull us apart. And yet, here I am, telling you about a girl with a red umbrella, because that's where everything changed. That's where I started choosing her, every day, even on the days I almost didn't. Kyoto, a girl with a red umbrella, a foreigner with a soaked notebook, a shared silence that said everything words couldn't. I didn't mean to return the next day. I told myself I was just walking, exploring, letting Kyoto guide me. But my feet led me back to that temple, as if some part of me remembered before I did. She was there again. Same umbrella, same posture, different scarf. This time she looked up and said, "You again?" I nodded, sheepish. "Just walking." She raised a brow. "Many people walk here when they are lost." I laughed. "Then I must be walking the right way." That became our ritual. Every few days I'd find myself back at the temple. Sometimes she'd be there, sometimes not. When she was, we'd talk. Stumbling conversations made of half English, half Japanese, and a strange, unspoken third language that only we understood. Her name was Aiko. She told me it meant child of love. I said that suited her. She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks turned pink. "And you?" she asked one day, brushing snow from the stone bench beside her. Daniel, I replied. No hidden meaning, just Daniel. She seemed to consider this. Daniel sounds like someone who carries too much in his mind. I opened my notebook, showing her pages of half-formed sentences and abandoned story titles. You're not wrong. She touched one page, traced the ink with her finger. You write about people? Mostly about things I don't understand, which is a lot. Good, she said. Understanding ruins some things. We laughed, but the way she said it, gently, without looking up, made it sound like a truth she'd learned the hard way. We never made plans. We just found each other, again and again. Sometimes we shared canned coffee from the vending machine down the street. Other times, she'd bring a thermos of something herbal, warm and bitter, and we'd sit side by side in silence, watching the incense smoke dance between the trees. Once, I asked her why she kept coming back. She didn't answer at first. Then, after a long breath, she said, "Because when I'm here, I forget what I'm supposed to be." That stayed with me, because I didn't know what I was supposed to be either. One day, as we were parting, she turned back and asked, "Would you like to see something?" She led me down a narrow path, past moss-covered walls and small wooden homes. At the end stood a bookstore, tiny, packed, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking. Inside, it smelled like paper and rain. We browsed without speaking. She pulled a book from the shelf, flipped to a poem, and pointed. "You can read this?" she asked. I squinted. Not really. She whispered the lines slowly, like she was translating from another life. Snow falls again. The world becomes quiet. A name in my chest I can no longer say out loud. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my tiny apartment, the blanket tangled around me, and kept hearing her voice. Soft, steady, full of things unsaid. And for the first time since I arrived in Japan, I didn't feel like a tourist anymore. I felt like I had started something. Something fragile, something real. They laughed without translating. They walked without destination. For a while, the world outside them just waited. We never said the word dating. There were no declarations, no checkboxes ticked. Just the quiet certainty of showing up for each other, again and again. We drifted into something softer than love songs and louder than friendship. Something that felt like home, even if neither of us said so. Some nights, we wandered aimlessly through Nishiki Market, fingers grazing the edges of fruit stands, laughing over who could pronounce the names of the pickled vegetables correctly. Cutie. Cutie? Q-U-D. That's what I said. No, Daniel, you said cucumber in pain. Other nights, we crammed into karaoke booths with echoing walls and sang off-key versions of songs neither of us truly knew. She'd laugh so hard she'd cry. I'd pretend not to notice the tears. There was a rooftop she liked, above an old apartment building that overlooked the schoolyard. We'd sit up there for hours, bundled in layers, her head on my shoulder as kids played below. Once, I asked why she liked it. "Because it reminds me of before everything got so complicated," she said. Before what? Before I started trying to be what they expected. I didn't press. Instead, I handed her my pen. "Draw me." "No." "Why not?" "Because then you'd see how I see you." She said it like a confession, and I didn't know if she meant that as a compliment or a warning. We had a favorite coffee shop. Narrow, full of secondhand books, where the owner played old jazz vinyls and never asked questions. We'd sit side by side in the corner booth, legs brushing under the table, speaking just enough to fill the space between pages. She liked to press flowers in her sketchbook. I liked to steal lines from her doodles to write short stories in the margins of mine. She caught me once, copying a phrase she'd scribbled in Japanese. You can't write that. Why not? Because it's mine. I grinned. Now it's ours. She didn't smile at first, but later that night, she texted me the translation. What I'm afraid to say is what matters most. It became our secret phrase. We used it when things got too quiet, when we didn't know how to say what we felt. One evening, we sat on the riverbank, watching reflections blur across the water. She rested her head against my shoulder and whispered, "I think I'm forgetting who I was before you." I turned to her, heart tightening. "Do you want to remember?" She didn't answer. Instead, she took my hand and held it tighter than she ever had. And I, fool that I am, thought that was enough. But looking back, I see the truth. We were building something delicate without knowing what it needed to survive. We thought love was the roof, but we hadn't laid the foundation, and the weather was coming. Why do you always check the time after we kiss? Because I'm scared time's running too fast. The first time we argued, it wasn't even an argument. More like a crack. A hairline fracture beneath a beautiful surface. It was a Tuesday. She had waited 20 minutes at the train station while I wandered through a bookstore, headphones in, lost in some obscure essay about identity and language. By the time I arrived, breathless and apologizing, she wasn't angry. She just said, "You don't notice time the same way I do." I tried to joke. "I lose track when I'm happy." She nodded, but didn't smile. Instead, she walked ahead of me. Not fast, not dramatic, just ahead. Later that night, we sat across from each other in her apartment. She was silent, slicing an apple with precision. I was tapping my fingers on the table. "Why are you quiet?" I asked. "I'm not angry," she said without looking up. "But when you're late, I start to feel like I matter less." That stopped me cold. I wanted to say, "Of course you matter." I wanted to say, "I'm just careless, not cruel." But what came out was, "I didn't think it was a big deal." She placed the knife down gently. That's exactly what makes it one. I remember thinking, this is how small things become big. Not through shouting, but through absence, through what's not said. Still, we kept going. We learned. We made tiny adjustments, like two dancers trying not to step on each other's toes. She started texting reminders, short and polite. "Meet at 5? 5, not 5:10? I set silent alarms on my phone, named after her. Aiko, don't be late. We learned to laugh at ourselves. We made rituals out of compromise. One night, I cooked dinner. A disaster of undercooked rice and oversalted miso. She ate every bite and said, "You love through effort. I love through rhythm." I asked her what that meant. She just smiled, stood up, and began to hum as she washed the dishes. Each movement, sponge, rinse, try, in perfect time, like a song only she could hear. We had different cadences. I rushed, wandered, improvised. She planned, paced, perfected. And yet, we tried. We kept trying. I remember a morning when I woke up early just to walk her to the station. We didn't talk much. She held my arm. I held the silence. Before boarding the train, she turned to me and said, "Today, I feel like I'm not walking alone." That stayed with me. Because for all the little stumbles, we still reached for each other in the dark. We were learning a new language. Not Japanese, not English. Something built from pauses, gestures, forgiveness. A love that didn't come with subtitles, but one we both wanted to understand. You live in stories. I live in seasons. It started with a map. We were in her apartment, the kotatsu humming beneath us, and she unfolded a tourist brochure I'd picked up at the station. Nothing fancy, just glossy photos of distant places. Thailand, Portugal, New Zealand. "Where would you go?" I asked, half expecting her to say nowhere. But she traced a finger over Kyoto. "Here, I'm already where I want to be." I smiled, not realizing that was the beginning of a silent fracture. Later that week, I found her sketching the layout of a house. Tiny, quiet, with a garden in the back. My grandmother's house, she said. I'd like to live there one day. Maybe teach art to kids. Open a tiny gallery or just sell prints from home. That sounds beautiful, I said. But something twisted inside me, because I couldn't imagine staying in one place long enough to repaint a wall. I didn't tell her that. Instead, I joked, "Can I be the foreign guy who lives above the gallery and writes brooding poetry about rain?" She laughed, but I saw it. The flicker in her eyes. Not amusement, uncertainty. I filled notebooks with story fragments, each one set in a different country. She started looking up mortgage rates. I dreamed aloud of backpacking across Southeast Asia. She talked about health insurance and family gatherings. "Do you ever think about going somewhere different?" I asked one night. She didn't answer immediately. Then, carefully, "I've spent my whole life learning how to stay. Why would I leave now?" I looked at her, trying to find words that wouldn't sound like escape. Because sometimes leaving shows you what home really means. She looked at me like I had just confessed a betrayal I didn't understand. And sometimes it just means you were never meant to stay. That night, we lay back to back in bed. No anger, just distance. And that was worse. In the morning, she kissed me on the shoulder. No words, no questions, just a press of lips against skin. Maybe a goodbye in disguise. I wrote a line in my notebook that day. What if the person you love is your lighthouse, but your ship isn't meant to dock? And I hated myself for writing it, because I didn't want her to be a place I passed through. I wanted her to be the reason I stayed. But what if staying meant losing the part of me that always needed to go? She once told me, "You live in stories, I live in seasons." And I think that was her way of saying, stories don't need to end, but seasons do. We were running out of time, and neither of us knew how to stop the clock without breaking something. They never pushed me out, but they never let me in either. I met her parents during plum blossom season. The air was sweet and sharp, and the streets looked like postcards. I wore a button-down shirt I didn't know how to iron properly. She wore a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. As we walked toward the gate of her family's home, she touched my arm and said, "Just be polite, and don't speak too much Japanese. Not here." I nodded, unsure whether she was protecting me or them. Her father opened the door. His eyes went from my shoes to my eyes, without touching the space in between. He bowed. I bowed lower. Too low. He didn't laugh. Neither did she. The dinner was quiet. Not tense, not exactly. Just tight. Every time I tried to speak, her mother would smile tightly and redirect the conversation. Every time I looked at Aiko for help, she gave me the kind of look that says, "Please, just get through this." At one point, her father asked, "And what are your intentions here?" I blinked. I live here. I teach English." "No," he said, placing his cup gently down. "Not here, with her." Aiko's chopsticks stopped mid-air. Her mother cleared her throat. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I had words, so many, but none that would fit the script they wanted. Words that wouldn't sound like intrusion, or ambition, or foolishness. Afterward, walking home in silence, I asked, "Did I say something wrong?" She didn't answer at first. Then, "They think you're temporary, a phase, like studying abroad or summer fireworks. Beautiful, but gone by morning. Is that what you think?" She stopped walking. The wind moved a strand of hair across her face. I don't know what I think, she said, but I hate how much I care what they do. Later that week, she canceled a dinner we'd planned, said she needed time with her family. The next day, she was quiet. The day after that, she didn't answer my messages until midnight. When she finally called, she sounded small. My aunt said she saw us in the market. She said, I'm embarrassing myself. For loving someone? For loving someone who doesn't belong. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. I never thought I'd feel more foreign in someone's heart than I do on the street. Daniel, she whispered, but the line fell into silence. That night, I stayed up tracing the cracks in the ceiling of my apartment. I thought about how many languages love has, and how none of them matter if no one's willing to listen. She didn't leave me. Not yet. But the warmth in her voice began to fade. She laughed less, looked away more, and I began to wonder if I was becoming the prophecy they feared, a passing cloud over her stable sky. I love you, she said, but I can't keep fighting everything. We didn't break up, not the way people imagine it. No shouting, no slammed doors, no suitcases by the door. Just erosion, quiet, relentless, invisible until it wasn't. There was a Sunday when we sat across from each other in our favorite cafe. Same table, same jazz vinyl spinning in the background. But the air felt wrong. Too still. Like the space between us had stopped breathing. She stirred her coffee slowly, watching the spiral of cream disappear into the dark. I asked her what she was thinking. That maybe we're pretending not to see it, she said. See what? She didn't look up. The way we're unraveling. I wanted to reach across the table, but my hand stayed in my lap. I don't want to lose you. The words felt heavy in my mouth, like they'd waited too long to be said. I don't want to lose me, she whispered. That was the beginning of the end, though we kept pretending it wasn't. We still met, still kissed, still said, see you tomorrow, like it was a guarantee. But something had shifted. She smiled with her mouth, not her eyes. I wrote fewer stories, left more pages blank. One night, she came over with steamed sweet potatoes and green tea, the kind of comfort she used to offer freely. But that night, it felt rehearsed, like she was saying goodbye in advance. Do you still dream of leaving? She asked, as we sat on the floor beside the window. Sometimes, I admitted, but never from you. She nodded slowly. That's the part I can't make peace with. Then let me stay. If you stay for me, she said, will you resent me when it gets hard? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Because I was scared the truth would sound like a maybe. That night, she slept facing the wall. I watched the back of her neck rise and fall with every breath and tried to memorize it, just in case. In the morning, she didn't wake me. I heard the front door close like a whisper, and then nothing. No message that day, or the next. I walked by the temple, sat on our bench, ordered coffee for two. All the small rituals we built, now collapsing, quietly, with no audience. 1 week passed, then 2. I stopped counting, till one day, at sunset, I walked to the bookstore, the one she'd taken me to when we first met. And there she was, holding a book she didn't seem to read, eyes distant, posture tense. She saw me before I saw her. Didn't smile. Just said, I still come here. It's stupid. No. It means you remember. She closed the book, set it down, looked at me like I was a language she used to speak. Daniel, I love you. I felt hope rise in my chest like something reckless. But then she added, "But I can't keep fighting everything. Not my parents, not our future, not your fear, not mine." I stepped closer. "Then let's stop fighting. Let's just start choosing. I don't know how. We'll figure it out." She shook her head gently. "You still want everywhere, and I still need here. And I don't know how to be both at the same time." A pause, long enough to hear the pages rustle behind us. Then she placed something in my hand, a pressed flower, delicate, cracked at the edges. "It was between the pages," she said. From that day, I held it like it might disintegrate, and when she left, I didn't follow. Not because I didn't love her, but because I didn't know if love was enough anymore. We won't be perfect, but we'll be real. It had been 22 days. Not that I was counting, except I was. Every morning, I wrote the number in the corner of my notebook, just small enough to pretend it wasn't there. Then, one afternoon, I found her again. Not at the temple, not at the cafe, but at the river. Same bench, same scarf, same way she tucked her knees up to her chest when she didn't want to be seen. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should interrupt. But she looked up, as if she'd felt the air shift. "I thought you left," she said. "I almost did." "Why didn't you?" I sat beside her. "Because I don't want the story to end like this." She turned her face back toward the water, watching the ripples catch the late sunlight. "I've been thinking about all the things I want. Me too. And," she hesitated, "some of them don't match yours. I know." She looked at me, really looked, like she wanted to believe me but couldn't trust the part of herself that still hurt. "I don't want to make you small," she said, "and I don't want to make you wait." We sat in silence, the kind that doesn't beg to be filled, just shared. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small cloth pouch. Inside was a tiny wooden charm, a protective omamori, pale blue with golden thread. "My grandmother gave me this," she said. "I kept it in my bag since we met. I think I was always afraid I'd lose you." She placed it in my palm. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "Unless you ask me to." Tears filled her eyes. Not dramatic, not loud, just enough to blur her smile. "Then let's try again," she said. Not perfectly, just honestly. And that became our unspoken agreement. We didn't fix everything, but we began choosing not forever, not all at once, but today. We created rules no one else could see. She would teach her art classes in the mornings. I'd write in the afternoons. Sundays were sacred. One walk, no phones. Once a year, we'd go somewhere new, not to run, but to return differently. We fought still, but we fought toward each other now, not against. One night, as we built a flat-pack bookshelf for her gallery corner, I dropped a screw for the third time and collapsed in laughter. "You're hopeless," she said, smiling. "You chose me," I said. "Yes, and I still do." It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no fireworks, no swelling music, just two tired people with bruised hearts, learning how to love with their eyes open. And honestly, that was more romantic than anything I had ever written. We didn't need to give up our dreams. We needed to dream together. We didn't get married. Not yet. There were no rings exchanged, no sweeping declarations in front of lantern-lit shrines. Just mornings that began with, "What do you want today?" And nights that ended with, "Let's try again tomorrow." We moved into a small apartment near the edge of Kyoto, a place with creaking floors, thin walls, and a view of the mountains if you stood on tiptoe. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Her parents didn't say much. Her mother sent over pickled vegetables once, Her father never visited, but she smiled that she unpacked the box and said, "That's how they apologize." I didn't press. I just held her hand as she shelved the jars neatly. Some days were beautiful, others were heavy. We learned how to disagree, how to pause before hurting each other, how to say, "I'm scared," before saying, "I'm leaving." She began selling her artwork online. I taught part-time and wrote in the quiet hours between laundry and miso soup. One afternoon, I found her asleep with her head resting on a stack of sketches. She had ink smudged on her cheek and a faint smile on her lips. I stood there, not saying a word, just watching, just choosing. Because love, I learned, isn't about grand gestures or endless compatibility. It's about this, staying, choosing the same person when it's easy, and especially when it's not. Sometimes we walk together to the same temple where we met. She brings flowers. I bring my notebook. We sit on the same stone bench and listen to the wind move through the trees. "Do you still want to go everywhere?" she asked once, resting her head on my shoulder. "Yes," I said, "but only if you come with me. Or wait for me. Or send me stories while I go, and miss you the whole time." She laughed, not at me, but with me. Then maybe we already are everywhere. That night we returned home in silence, her hand curled around my arm, the cold biting at our cheeks. As we passed the station, she stopped. "You once said trains made you want to run." "I remember. Do they still?" I looked down the tracks, dark, endless, full of possibility. Then I looked at her. "No," I said. "They just remind me of how far I'd go to come back to you." She squeezed my hand, and in that moment, under a flickering street lamp, the world rushing quietly around us, I knew. We fell in love in Japan, and for a while we thought that would be the hardest part. But love wasn't the hardest part. Staying was. And we chose it anyway. If this story made your heart ache just a little, then don't leave quietly. Hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments, what would you give up to stay with the person you love? Here at Between Two Worlds, we tell stories that don't just entertain, they stay with you. Until next time, choose love every day.